It's Mike Brennan, and we're back with another edition of MITech TV. Matt is not joining us today. He's got some duties he has to attend to at Lawrence Technological University. So I'm going to go fly solo, but I think I can handle it. We're doing our monthly ITC Energy Report. And who I have with me today is very appropriate. It's Matt Kurpinski, Matthew Kurpinski, excuse me, VP of Information Technology and Chief Information Officer for ITC Holdings. That's that big, if you see the big power line towers, that's probably them, but he'll explain that in a moment. And what he's going to be talking about, reason I say it's apropos, is next month, October, is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and that's Matt's thing. He's got to keep the bad guys out of ITC, right, Matt?
That's right.
So
thanks for inviting me here today.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Let's talk a little bit about, again, we always assume people may not have heard of who we have on the show, so tell us all about ITC.
Sure, Mike. Let me start with a quick overview of the electric grid or the electric system. So the electric power that keeps lights on in homes and businesses flows through a three-part system. It starts at the power plants where the electricity is generated, and it's carried through the high voltage transmission lines over long distances. And then finally, it's distributed out through the smaller local power lines, aptly named distribution lines. They bring the electricity directly into the homes and buildings. Let me mention that transmission is important because it can carry the electricity over long distances much more efficiently. ITC is the nation's largest independent electric transmission company. Unlike other local power companies, we're uniquely focused on just the transmission portion of the system. We develop, build, and maintain the transmission infrastructure that holds a three-part system together, moving the power from where it's generated to where it's needed. We often think of the transmission system much like the highways on the roads. You have local roads and you have the highways where all the cars go fast and quickly. So that's kind of the electric transmission piece. In my role as the VP of Information Technology and CIO, I'm responsible for all information technology activities at ITC, including cybersecurity initiatives.
All right. And so people can clearly understand, you guys don't generate the power. That would come from DTE or consumers or some other power company like that. But then you carry it over the long miles and incredibly high voltages, because that's what you need to carry it over the long miles, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So the big towers out there, well, don't worry about touching them. They're like 100 feet in the air, but
yep.
But certainly that's where you see them all the time. So let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity, apropos for next month, and why is it so important to ITC?
So cybersecurity is the practice of protecting critical systems and sensitive information from digital attacks and unauthorized access. When you think about the power grid that I mentioned, it's a complex interconnected network of those three pieces: generation, transmission, and distribution. All of those leverage large control and communication sets of technologies. Now, those can be damaged by natural events, such as severe storms and things, but also by malicious events that are cyber attacks generally. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, we call that NERC, has developed reliability standards for the grid in its entirety, but also there's a subset of those that have to do with critical infrastructure protection. And they deal specifically with cybersecurity and physical security. These standards require the owners, the operators, and the nation's electric grid to implement training, physical security, and asset recovery plans, targeted at whether it's outages or whether it's as a result of a cyber attack. The threats to the grid are continually evolving and becoming more sophisticated. Our cybersecurity team works to stay ahead of those threats by putting systems in place to protect the grid.
Let's talk a little bit about those systems. Now, I've had the opportunity to tour the ITC facilities in Novi and go into your control room. We even shot some video in there, but recently, about a year or so ago, we were told to take it down because there was some concern about bad guys looking at that and being able to figure out what was going on. But let's talk a little bit about that. What sort of controls do you have in place?
So, we talk about threats to the grid, and one of the things is that the most important threat is probably the one that's right around the next corner, or the worst case, one that actually happens and is successful. There's a lot of There's a lot of things that we have that we play a critical role in operating and protecting the transmission grid assets. And we have, with an increasing number of cyber assets required to manage the systems, protection of those assets from cyber attacks has become critical for the company. The energy industry as a whole receives numerous cyber attacks attempts each day. So it's important that we focus on protecting our assets. We identify methods to address vulnerabilities, threats, and we invest in new technologies as threats continue to evolve. The threat actors are always working all the time. At ITC, we have a team of highly skilled and professional, dedicated professionals to monitor the company's network and identify and isolate threats as they arise. We have a pretty comprehensive cybersecurity program. Not only does it entail all the technologies we have internally, but we also leverage our vendors and other technology providers to understand emerging threats and find out ways to mitigate.
Which brings me to my next question. Does ITC work with other grid operators, organizations, et cetera, across the industry to kind of coordinate your beating back the bad guys here with these various threats?
Absolutely. Information sharing and close coordination between other utilities, industry groups, the government, and industry stakeholders is critical. The electric power industry is the only critical infrastructure sector that's subject to mandatory enforceable cybersecurity standards. Our company complies with all current regulatory requirements for grid protection, as well as regulations associated with confidentiality of privacy and critical information. We work closely with federal, state, and local agencies to provide information on current cyber threats and to find ways to improve our current cyber protection posture. We work with other industry groups. I mentioned NERC earlier, National North American Electric Reliability Corporation, regional entities, and federal agencies to enhance the cybersecurity of the bulk electric system. This also includes FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Energy.
All right. So what are some of the typical, when I was getting the briefing in the control room, I know that, for instance, the government entities, because we get them on a lot, lots of attacks constantly. And I imagine since everything is the electricity ties in with everything that we do in our life, that you guys must get a whole bunch of attacks, right?
There's always attempts on the outside walls. They're constant. They don't work 8 to 5, and neither do we. We have a 24/7 manned operation to keep an eye on things. So they're always there, and we're ready to react to them.
Yeah, a lot of them work on Moscow time, but we won't go into that, will we? So I've seen the reports, that the 9 to 5 in Moscow, which of course is a different time here, but funny thing. Anyway, yep. So let's turn to Cyber Awareness Month, which is October. And at the end of the month, of course, Michigan's governor is going to be hosting the Michigan Cybersecurity Conference, which we'll be covering. And next week, we're going to have some folks on from the Whitmer administration to talk about that. But let's talk about, in general, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Now, is this something where you really go out to your employees and kind of say, these are the ways the bad guys get in, like phishing attacks and things like that?
Yeah, so the acronym is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We call it NICSAM here. So it is something where we sort of raise the stakes. Now, we also think that every month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month at ITC, but no month is more special than the other. But we do up our game a little bit in October, and it does seem to be appropriate. We work with the staff to kind of make sure they kind of are reset with when it comes to security, not only for ITC, but even in their personal lives as well, right? We talked a little bit about technologies and some of the things we do in a very broad sense. I have to be careful how much I can say, but if I look at our best defense against cyber attacks, it's really our employees. And a well-educated and a well-trained employee base is one way, and that's the best way for us to defend against cyber attacks. Every year we host a series of activities. We try to make it fun, to change it up a little bit. we held phishing competitions, and that's a phishing with a PH, right? So,
Right.
those email phishing attacks. Although we have had the director, garb up in a fishing outfit with his pole and rod and stand in the hallways trying to catch people. So we try to make it enjoyable. We do quizzes, interactive panels, and we've even done cyber game shows within the company. We've got a lot more planned this year. I don't want to reveal too much because some of the employees just might be listening, but
We want to don't get them too prepared, right? You want to surprise them.
Exactly. We don't want to tell them what's around the corner this time. But October is really important because it's important on a personal level as we approach the holiday online shopping season as well, and to be more aware of those kinds of things. So
let's talk a little bit about advice you can offer to the people watching this show. I mean, you're well versed in all these things. I'm fairly well versed. I've been covering it for about 25 years. But what would you getting back to what you just said, that a lot of scams go on with e-commerce during the holidays, and people are so excited to get out there and buy that gift that sometimes they click on the wrong thing, don't they?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We're talking about cybersecurity and thinking, it's now becoming something that's becoming a little more prevalent in training in schools and things. But boy, it's an education that everyone really needs. It's really as fundamental as reading and writing. I think reading, writing, and instead of arithmetic, maybe it's cybersecurity. But there's a lot. I've got a few pieces of advice, and it really starts with secure your devices. If you have a phone, use a password, passcode, use the biometric features on it, lock your phone, because your phone has a lot of personal information. Maybe it has credit card information, etc. But also, when you get a new wireless router or a cable modem from your provider, oftentimes those are set to a default password. So go and change those passwords. Oftentimes it's not that easy to do, especially if you're not fluent with it, but there generally are step-by-step instructions in the manual on how to change those default passwords. Those are easily found outside in the real world. Talking about passwords, use strong passwords. We used to think to make them as convoluted as possible. Short was okay, but it's becoming much more important that long passwords are the new trend. So 15 characters or more, but they don't have to be super fancy. They don't, couple 3 words that are not related, not your full spelled out name, for example, but 3 random words that you can remember. Something that's easy to remember is more valuable. And the other thing is, don't reuse your passwords. You definitely don't want to use the same password at your bank that you do for Facebook or somewhere else, because one site gets hacked, you could be exposed to every one of those places you shared your passwords. We encourage a password manager for that. Wi-Fi. If you can avoid using Wi-Fi, unless you're really sure of what it is, like your home Wi-Fi, if you use public Wi-Fi, you have to be very careful. Anything that you do while you're on a public Wi-Fi, it has the potential to sort of have someone in essence looking over your shoulder, And then lastly, sort of to your point about looking out for scams, common sense is sort of the rule. When your bank never sends you a text message and all of a sudden it sends you a text message that something's going on, don't click on the link. It's funny, even nowadays, my bank still sends me, here, click on this email, click here to go see your statement. And I delete those emails and I go to the trusted source. I know what their website is, so go to the app that you use that's trusted, go to a website that that's trusted. If your brother-in-law sends you a new recipe and he wants you to click on this link, pick up the phone and call him and ask him if he really sent you that recipe. Especially when, you don't like chocolate chip cookies and the recipe was for that. So, use common sense. And I think the best thing is be skeptical, be suspicious. It really is, it's sad that the IRS never calls you or texts you to make payments, right? You'll get a letter in the mail. So anytime you get a phone call, a text, an email that you're suspicious of, go to the source. So using that, I think, will help the listeners protect themselves from bad actors.
And 2-factor authentication too. I have everything I log into comes to my phone saying you need to put this code in, and so the bad guys wouldn't have that, right?
Absolutely, definitely.
All right. Well, coming down the home stretch here. So if folks want to find out more about ITC and ITC Holdings, the parent company, how do they do that?
You can go to itc-holdings.com, and there's more information on our website there.